Hey folks, so our next presenter is Abel Brodeur from the University of Ottawa. And Abel is going to talk about introducing the Institute for Replication, which is a brand new institute, probably a month or so old. And so hopefully you're able to sleep at night and, the feeding isn't too much of a hassle. But thank you very much, Abel.
Hey, thanks a lot for the invitation. And it's a great workshop, great conference. I missed a bit of yesterday, but everything's on YouTube, so it's been great to catch up at night when the kids are sleeping. Can everybody see the slides? Yeah.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So this is an institute that I launched with so many collaborators about a month ago, and I've been thinking of doing this for years. And this year I'm on sabbatical, so that was my project. The goal really is to try to promote and generate as many reproduction and replications as possible. We're starting in the field of economics, finance, political science, and then moving on within a year, hopefully adding some subfields of sociology, demography, for instance, criminology, and then public health. But the goal is really generate as many replications as possible in these fields, and then moving on to other disciplines, and to have a website where we're going to be able to post and put all the documentation related to these replications that we're going to try to generate. We're also doing many other things related to educational material, putting together courses, etc. But I won't say much about this. I'll focus more on, in this talk at least, on what we're trying to achieve in terms of generating replications. I don't know how much I wanted. So yesterday I was playing with the slides and kind of deleting a couple of slides because I thought, like, do I really need to motivate the idea that replications are that important and essentials? Let me just talk a bit about my own discipline, economics. There's just not that much replications in economics, and I'll get into some definitions later on of what I mean by replications and what I mean by reproduction. But just keep in mind for the moment, reproduction is more just running the codes, whereas replication is something else. It can be robustness checks, can be sensitive analysis, or it can be replicating the study using the raw data with new procedures. But anyway, when we think about replications in economics or social sciences in general, there's just not that many. In economics, maybe 20 a year are getting published. Number of comments are going down in top journals. And we don't know whether it's a problem of supply or demand. That's the other thing. I mean, many people are not doing replication just because they think that it's going to be very hard to publish their replications. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. So I'll finish the talk talking to you about the survey that we did among editors at top journals in economics, political science, and finance in order to understand whether that's the case or not, whether there's an interest for replications. But anyway, at least right now, we're in an equilibrium where there's not that many replications. We also know, I mean, I won't go over this, but that when there's a replication, for experimental economics, we're talking about replication rate of 50%. For non-experimental, close to 0% replication rate. I mean, it's almost impossible to see published or even a discussion paper of a replication of a non-experimental study that is robust. And that's a problem, because there has to be tons of studies that are replicated, successfully replicated, whatever successfully mean. Let's say same sign and statistical significance. And we just never heard of these studies. So that's more a problem that we have, I think. We're in a very bad equilibrium in economics and many social sciences and art sciences where there's not that many replications. We have no idea whether it's just demand for replications. Clearly, people don't believe that's the case. And the replications that we're seeing are all negative. So that's the equilibrium that we are in, and that's the equilibrium we want to change. And we thought that if you want to change this equilibrium, you need a big push. And of course, we're not going to achieve this alone. But the way I've been thinking about this for years now is you need a big push. You need to attack this problem and try to change equilibrium through many different things. And you need key players. be it editors or top people in every single field, subfield within a discipline. And that's what we're going to try to do, trying to collaborate with people who have power, who are important in a specific discipline, and trying to get them on board and trying to get them to suggest potential replicators, people that work with them, their collaborators, their students, and that these people replicate studies. Studies published in the best journals, and that's kind of the idea. So let me give you a bit more information just in general, and then I'll go into the specifics of what do I mean by we have some top people who propose names of replicators, and we contact the replicators and we try to get them to replicate papers published in top journals. So I'll give you more details on this, but that's kind of the idea right now. Just a bit more on just why do we have so few replications? Is it lack of incentives? Is it because it's harmful for your career? That's possible. And again, maybe that's the case because there's so few replications. If it would be normal to do replications, it would be part, for instance, of graduate programs, or if many people in your network would have done replications, maybe it wouldn't be that harmful. But when you see a replication, usually it's negative. And we've all heard stories of people potentially doing replications and having not a very positive and enthusiastic response from the original authors. So, there's a lot of things that we're going to try to fix here with kind of a new model to generate replications. Already talked about this bad equilibrium, but let me just tell you a bit more about like some definitions quickly. I think most of you are going to be comfortable with these definitions, and I really don't want to start a debate on whether we should change the definitions, or there's so many out there. There's not a perfect one, but here's the thing that we're going to stick with. So there's reproduction, so what I'm going to call conceptual reproducibility, which is you're going to use the same data and same code, and the idea is kind of just push button. So you're just trying to reproduce the results. So this is what I'm going to be calling reproduction or reproducibility. And then there's different types of replications. So we're going to be interested in both reproductions and also replications. And the focus is going to be to try to get people to replicate studies that have been successfully reproduced. And we're going to be able to do this because now a lot of top journals in economics and political science and finance have actually a data editor, like Lars, for instance, who's making sure that the results are reproducible. So we're going to have a list of studies that are reproduced. And for these studies, we're going to be trying to looking for a replicator, kind of making the job of a replicator a bit easier. At least we know that the codes are running. And the replicator can focus on different types of replication. Potential robustness check. Since the analysis, I'm going to be calling this robustness replicability. So basically using the same data, but you can change the codes. Maybe you're going to change the way standards are clustered, different ways of weighting different observations, adding, changing the controls, etc. Then there's also potentially a direct replicability, which is you're using the same code, but you're going to be using new data. So usually this is more for experimental studies, but we have some replicators who are doing this right now for non-experimental studies. Then there's conceptual replicability, where you kind of use new data, new codes. This is going to be sometimes the case, but it's going to be mostly, for instance, if the data can only be accessed by a couple of researchers somewhere in Norway in a lab, maybe another researcher in Finland who has access to similar data for Finnish population can actually potentially do something similar in that specific context. But when I'm going to be talking about replications, think more about robustness or direct replication. Okay, so what's the idea? So we have a set of studies that we would like to be replicated. Now we can all agree or disagree on what should be the criteria for choosing which studies to be replicated. There's not a perfect answer. We discussed for weeks and months about this, and we ended up choosing some top journals and only 2022 going forward. So we're not going in the past. We're only going to try to replicate studies that are published starting in January going forward. And one reason we decided to do this is simply because, first, some original authors might find this a bit more fair. Sometimes you see replications that use new codes or new procedures. I mean, those are super interesting, but if you replicate a study from, let's say, 1990, which is seminal, using techniques that were not available back then, sometimes it kind of makes it a bit hard for the communication with the original author. So one of the reasons why we started this. The other reason is just resources. We were just not able to do everything. And in terms of citation, so another idea could have just been, well, as soon as a study reaches, say, 100 Google Scholar citations, you can try to replicate it. This kind of became a bit complicated. Some studies and some fields might get there faster. So anyway, we ended up choosing 2022 in a list of journals. So for these journals, we're going to collaborate with the data editor. And the data editor is going to tell us whether the data is available and whether his team or her team were able to reproduce the results or not. Sometimes it's not feasible because the data is just, they cannot share it. Some journals provide or ask the authors to provide scientific data. So it's feasible. So depending on which journals, there's different policies. But anyway, then we have a list of studies that have been reproduced. And for those, we're going to be interested in looking for replicators. We're going to have a board. So the Institute for Replication, what I'm talking to you about, is not a journal. It's just an institute. But we have a board of editors. And you can go on the website and you'll see the list for each field, for economics and for political science. We're trying to cover all the subfields of these disciplines. So we have a board who's going to receive this list of studies. So every month I send them, here's the list of studies that were successfully reproduced by the data editors or by our own team who's able also to reproduce for other journals. And so they have this information, and then they're going to propose names of replicators. Then we contact the replicators, the names that are suggested, and we ask them whether they're interested in replicating the paper. Sometimes they say yay, sometimes they say no, and maybe other editors are going to suggest names, but that's kind of the idea. So of course, we're not going to be able to find replicators for every single study published in these journals. This would be hundreds and hundreds, but sometimes we're able to. So then we have a replicator who's not self-selecting himself or herself into replicating that study. We nominate this person. So this also removes a bit of the conflict of interest sometimes that you have for replications. For instance, in economics, well known that David Card and Borjas always argue and have been arguing for 20, 30 years about immigration and the effect of immigrants. You don't necessarily want David Card to replicate the study by Borjas. You kind of know that he's going to find that it's not robust. So here we nominate and we select the replicators. It kind of removes a bit of that. The other thing is the replicator can remain anonymous for a period of time. Removing also potentially this thing that there could be negative reputational effects for that person. Okay? So here the idea is we're going to ask the replicator to give us the equivalent of a refer report. It's not a refer report, it's a reputation report. And then once we have this paper, this replication, then we send it to the original authors and we ask them to provide us an answer. And then we post simultaneously both the replication and the answer from the original author on our website to the working papers at the same time, simultaneously. Okay. Of course, when the board of editors propose names of replicators, there are people who are either experts in the field or that's their field of their graduate student. So replicators can be graduate students, they can be postdoc, they can be assistant professor. We have a mix right now. It's unclear when we're going to reach a large number of replications, what's going to be the fraction and the share of, is it mostly graduate students, is it mostly faculty? But also sometimes what happens is we reach out to someone who's a faculty member and he's going to do replication with one of his or her students. So they can collaborate with this. Okay, so replicators, they can be anonymous. That's their choice. There's two ways that they can do their replication. So I wrote down an example, a template of how to write down your replication. So if they do this, they can, if they use this template, they can remain anonymous for pretty much ever. But we also propose them to use a platform, the SSRP, Social Science Reproduction Platform, that was developed by collaborators at at BITS in Berkeley. And if they use that platform, they can remain anonymous for up to 4 years. Okay, so replicators can remain anonymous. They don't really have an incentive to show that the results don't replicate or replicate. And that's kind of neat. And our goal at the end of the day is going to be to disseminate both positive and negative replications. We don't really care about the outcome of replication. The goal is just to try to document, and there's multiple replication for a single paper, that's fine too. We have a conflict of interest policy. So of course, you cannot be a colleague, recent collaborator, friend, etc. The same for the board of editors. They cannot nominate or select replicators if they know the original authors. And the replicators kind of choose how they're going to do the replications. So we give them a template on how to report their replication outcomes, but we don't give them instructions on how they should do it. They can do a direct replication if the raw data is available. Sometimes not the case, or they can do a robustness replication. That's their choice. But we do require a pre-analysis plan. So the replicator has to write a pre-analysis plan telling us what they're going to do, and then they can go in the code, changing the codes, etc., doing robustness replications, for instance. And then in the report, they have to write what was pre-registered and what was not. Okay, so we're trying to limit a bit cherry picking here for the replicator. Okay, so the replicators basically they can reassess reproducibility, but in theory, this has been done internally or by the data editors. Then they can do sensitive analysis, they can improve the analysis, changing things. Then they give us a short report. We send this report to the original authors, and then they can change their report once they see the answers of the original authors. Maybe the original authors point out some things, maybe there's a discussion, etc. And then we're going to simultaneously release these two things, the report and the answer from the original authors. Already said this, skip this. Okay, so if you go on our website and you go to reports, you'll see the list of studies that needs to be replicated. And you'll see that we already have for these journals, for the issues in January and February, whether the data is available, whether it has been successfully reproduced or not. If that's not reproduced because the data needs to be accessed in a specific or in a specific data center, for instance, then we try to look for someone who's going to become a reproducer, if you will. And then, of course, in the future, we're interested in expanding this selection of journals, depending on whether we get funding, more people involved. And as I said, by the end of the year, we're hopeful to add demography, terminology, and potentially starting with public health journal. Okay, so why on earth would you do this? Why would you become a replicator? We try to incentivize this to some extent. So the first thing is we're in touch with a lot of journal editors. We're independent, but of course, through our network, we know many journal editors. So we're trying to put together as many special issues as possible, dedicated solely to replications. For instance, at my own journal, Canadian Journal of Economics, there's going to be a special issue where we're going to publish a number of replications. We're going to also try to put sessions together and trying to get some papers published in the different papers and proceedings at conferences. If you replicate a paper for us, you become a co-author to a meta paper that we're going to write and put together all the replications. So you don't even need to publish your own replication. You're going to become a co-author automatically for that meta paper. We're trying to put people together. We're also collaborating with many instructors who can have their student in a class replicating studies, and then maybe he can select, or she can select 2 or 3 of the best replications, and then the students and the instructor, him or herself, is co-author in the meta paper. Anyway, so we have things like this going on to try to incentivize people to do replication for us. What do we do for priority data? So here it depends on which discipline we're talking about. Reproducibility rate in political science are over 95%, which just blew me away. The data editors can almost always reproduce the results. We're not there in economics, I can tell you this. We're like 50% maybe, but the gap is massive, insane. And there's many reasons for this, and we can talk about this later. for those interested. But one of the big reasons is in economics, we're using tons of data set for a single paper. We're using admin data. We're using data that nobody else has access to. And it's kind of a fight in some fields like labor economics to have access to the best data. And if you have access to the best data, you can publish in the best journals. That's kind of the way the field has progressed over time. So it's less and less transparent in a way. And people have rents. So once you have more access to one of these big data set, then you can exploit these rents. But anyway, one of the cool thing is some of the data editors, for instance, Lars at the EAA has developed lots of collaboration with, for instance, French institutions. So we have access to pretty much every single data set in France that you can think of. And we can have this reproduced through collaborators at Cascade. The same for Sweden. In Canada, we're getting much better. We have access also to census data. Then we were looking more and more for people in Scandinavia, other countries in Scandinavia that have access to these amazing data sets. Same for Germany. So we have collaborations. And one thing that now we're doing is the Replicator can propose changes to the codes. And then somebody on site in Norway, for instance, or in Germany is going to have access to the original data set and change the codes for the Replicator. So we're able to do this remotely more and more. So, but it makes things harder. But anyway, I think we're making a lot of progress into reproducing these studies that before could not be reproduced, and also now potentially replicating them. As I mentioned, we're using, or we're telling replicators and instructors that they can use the social science reproduction platform. If you don't know that platform, it's great. You should definitely have a look. We also have guidelines that have been developed by people at BITS for replicators, kind of giving them a bit of guidelines how to report the results, etc. And there's also a template. I forgot to put the link there for replicators, which is on our website. Last thing I want to talk about quickly, running out of time. If you go to publishing on our webpage, so the page publishing, you'll see a list of call for papers that we put together, and we're working to put more together. It's dedicated to replication. But you also see a survey that we've done in December for something like 50 top editors, so top journals in economics and political science. And you'll see the answers to two questions that we asked the editors. The first one is, would you be willing to publish a comment or replication of a study that was published in your own journal? They can say yes, they can say no. And sometimes they don't want to say yes or no. They want to have a long answer. So we put the long answer. And then the second question is, would you be willing to publish a comment or replication of a study that was not published in your own journal? Sometimes they say yes, but usually it's because it would be a higher ranked journal. It's totally fair. But you see the answers of the editors. And it's actually quite good. I would say that depending on which field we're talking about and subfields, like a lot of journals would be interested in publishing comments and replication. I was quite surprised to see this. And when you chat with these editors and they don't want to make that part of the conversation public, it's a question of supply. Like they've never received a single comment. Like an editor has been like editor of the top field, told me like in 15 years, did not receive a single comment ever submitted to his journal. So at the end of the day, I mean, it's purely a question of demand also, but supply is a problem. So we're in this really value driven where people think it's impossible to publish comments because they never see comments. Well, one reason you never see comments, they're never submitted, they're never written. So anyway, I look at the survey. Some fields are, let's say, more willing to publish comments than other fields. Let's say the worst field is probably macroeconomics in terms of publishing comments. But you'll see big differences across journals too. And I think it's neat for people who have a reputation or a comment and don't know where to publish it. They can go there and actually see a list of journals that potentially would be interested in their comment. It's kind of it. Spread the word. We're looking for replicators. People can contact us if there's a list of studies that are interested, or study in general that are interested in replicating. We're trying to help them publish them, also putting them in touch with potentially journals that are interested in. We're really doing whatever we can to promote and generate replications. And I'll just stop there and interested in looking for your question and feedback.
Thanks very much, Abel. Really appreciate it. And obviously exciting about the Institute. Congratulations on its launch. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Yeah, if it's published 2022, it was written 5-6 years ago, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Abel,
Jake.
there's one quick question.
Jake.
Forgot if you mentioned it. Are there any like small funds that would help graduate students do these kind of replications? I could imagine, $1,000, like small amounts might, pay for a part of a summer for somebody, and the grad student would learn a ton, and then you'd get a great replication. Or have you been thinking about kind of those?
Yeah, we've applied for lots of funding in the summer. We're waiting to see if it's going to happen. But we've been told by some funders that they want to see us doing replications and kind of having it rolling with the website and everything. And then if it's working, they're going to be interested. So we had to start with all the funding, but that's definitely something more.
Got it. Cool.
Any other questions or comments? I've had a lot of success with undergrads. They need a little bit more steering in terms of like, don't email the author with your angry comments. But like, I found them amazing in terms of replications of papers. The strong ones, of course.
No, I agree. I mean, the
Whereas
most
your focus is graduate students because of the funding question, or?
No, I mean, if an undergrad student is interested, I mean, we're working with instructors right now that have been doing replication as, class assignment for years. And now we're telling them, look, I mean, if you got good replication and this is part of this list of studies, I mean, you get co-authorship and medal paper, and I think it's going to motivate even more like some students. I mean, the best students I've ever had were undergrad, and they were amazing. Like, it's just, some of them are fantastic. So if undergrad students are also interested in doing this, I mean, no problem. So far, the board has not suggested me an undergraduate student, but there's no reason why they would not. If somebody is interested, and yeah.
Any other comments or questions? You have tenure, don't you? So you can afford to do this?
I got tenure, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I was waiting a bit to do this for many reasons. I don't think the tenure mattered too much. I mean, I'm at U Ottawa, it's not a top department. So from the moment I got hired, I knew I would get tenured easily. So that was never really I was waiting because we needed the data editors. And I think 3-4 years ago, political science was nowhere near having data editors. Now it's getting much better. And economics is moving really fast now. There's like 9 journals with data editors. Because if you don't have them and you ask someone to replicate a study from scratch, it's just a lot of work, because they don't know what the data is available. They don't know where their codes are going to run. So here we send them an email saying, look, it's running. You can focus completely on using either the raw data. We tell them whether the raw data is there or just robustness. So it saves them a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah, do you want to add a link to your mailing list and things like that? Maybe you can put it in the chat so folks can sign up.
Yeah, we don't have yeah, that's you. Yeah, one thing more, I'll email you, Jake, but we don't have we have a Twitter account, which someone is running for me because I'm not a social media person. But I'll start a mailing. I'll ask someone to start a mailing list. I'm not good at stuff like that.
It's just a very inspiring project that you're doing, and it'd be nice to, but this is the first time I've heard of it. And so I really want to be, not lose sight of it as you guys go forward.
Sure. That's a great idea.
I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I only randomly, did Gelman blog about it maybe like a month ago? I think I randomly heard about it.
Yeah, I tried
Gelman.
to get us out a bit. Like I did 3 or 4 guest blogs. Andrew Gelman accepted, but I mean, I don't know how to spread the word more than just having people on Twitter sharing things. And I think, the moment we're going to start having some replications, it's going to be easier. Yeah. But now we're just starting. So it's been a month. I mean, we don't have a lot to show for. I think the survey is kind of cool, but other than that, when you look at the website, there's not like that much to get excited about. So I think this summer, maybe we're going to make another push when we're going to start to have some results and stuff.
Cool. Well, yeah, great stuff. And good to see that someone in econ is sort of pushing these forwards, these ideas forward. Thanks very much, Abel.